I
That was Star Wars, but it works. It works, Dylan.
You know what?
There.
You're right.
I think I have my mic really close, so it should be better now. What episode are we on, Dylan?
We are on episode 10, Hide and Q.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. Give us a plot summary, Dylan.
Plot summary, here we go. The Enterprise goes to help victims of a mining explosion when they are stopped in their tracks by Q. He promises to realize their most impossible dream. Let me retry that.
We're off to a good start.
Yep. You know, this is the most professional podcast you'll ever listen to.
Yeah.
Anyways, he promises to realize their most impossible dreams as long as they play his game. He teleports everyone except the captain away to a distant planet where a strange game of military warfare plays out with weird animal creatures dressed like 18th century French soldiers. After a while, Q reveals that he has given Riker the powers of the Q, which allows him to save his crewmates by teleporting them back to the ship. Q reveals to Riker that the Q are interested in humans because of a compulsion to learn and explore. Q also makes a wager with Picard that if Riker accepts his gift, Picard will lose his command. And if Riker doesn't, Q promises to leave humans alone. The Enterprise finally reaches the planet with the victims, and Riker promises Picard that he will not use his powers because of temptation. He regrets that decision when he sees a dead little girl and doesn't revive her due to his promise. Riker then becomes seduced by the power, and Q shows up again, prodding Riker to give each of the bridge crew a gift. After everyone refuses his gift, Q is forced to leave due to his wager, and the Enterprise continues along its way. The end.
Yeah. Little production note. This was also directed by, what's his name? Cliff Bull, he's directed a couple so far, I think. And
was he the guy that directed the last episode as well? I forget.
I can't remember, but he's the guy who did the famous Best of Both Worlds arc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We mentioned him before. I think it was last episode, but it might not be.
And I don't have a lot to say about this episode other than that it was decent and it was enjoyable because Q is probably the best character in the entire Star Trek franchise. Like, you can't go wrong with him, really.
Yeah, Q is one of the franchise's best characters because he's just so, like, arrogant and quirky and bizarre.
And just the whole idea of what he is, too.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I feel like it was Gene Roddenberry's idea of what God would be if he existed. Roddenberry was an atheist. But I think he's kind of... I saw a couple of quotes here and there where he's saying it was kind of what he envisioned, like, if there was a God, it would just be another level of being. You know?
Yeah.
Just on a different plane. And so, I don't know, Q has always been really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's my first good, is just Q being as quirky as always, because whenever he shows up, things are just bizarre and amusing.
Yeah.
So
you give us your observations, Dylan.
Well, like I said, my first good was Q being quirky. My second good was I liked that Picard wasn't distant in this episode, because for much of this first season, especially like in the very first episode, he's so cold and distant from everybody and just kind of an ass, honestly.
Yeah.
He's just not a very pleasant person. In this episode, he actually has a moment with Tasha when Tasha gets put into Q's penalty box, as he calls it, because she basically speaks out of turn, and she has this moment where she's like crying, and Picard goes up to her and says, you know, oh, there's a new rule on the bridge, tears are permitted within the penalty box or something, and it's like, oh, that's actually kind of sweet, which is, you know, more than we usually see him interacting with his crew members on a personal level.
Yeah. Picard is evolving a little bit from their original intention, I think.
Yeah.
And Patrick Stewart was evolving too, as he said many times in the beginning of the first season. He was also distant, and it made his character more distant.
Yep. It's nice when actors openly admit that, you know, they were flawed instead of, you know, what we normally see.
Well, he came out of Shakespeare, so I get why, because that's a really professional scene to be in.
Yeah.
It takes all you got.
Yep, and plus, you know, it's really weird to go from from stage acting to television acting. My brain is not working properly today, Tyler.
Yeah. My goods and stuff they were all pretty much the same as yours. Picard is a little better. Q is just fascinating, and I could watch, all of his episodes pretty much back to back, and I wouldn't get sick of him. It's probably my favorite part of Star Trek. Just, all the implications of what his existence means in that universe, and I don't know. It's, I don't really have any bad, besides, well, I guess the only observations I really have, this is going to be a short one this time, there's just some silly stuff.
Yeah, do you mind if I cover my last good before we jump into the bad?
Yeah.
Just because. My other good was, I liked, like I said in the plot summary, Q tells Riker that the reason the Q are so interested in humans is because of their compulsion to explore and learn. And he says that it's a compulsion that could one day make them even more powerful than the Q already are. I thought that was an interesting sort of exploration of human nature, because it's so true. We are very much compelled to understand, to explore, to just find out everything we can about the universe that we live in.
Yeah, and they expand it, from what I remember, in some other Q episodes where Q talks about it, and he says it's our greatest positive trait and also a big negative, because it also leads us to rely on crutches and things to explain stuff, because we need everything explained. We want to understand how everything works.
Yep.
So, it's a good appraisal of humanity. Mm-hmm. And hearing an outsider say it is cool.
Yeah, it's something that Star Trek's always been very good at, exploring human nature and that kind of thing.
TNG is definitely about the best side of human nature, whereas DS9 is more about the negative side, which is, Yeah,
which we'll eventually get to, which will be interesting, because for those who are listening, our plan after we finish TNG is to go on to Deep Space Nine, and I have never actually seen a single episode of Deep Space Nine, whereas Tyler has seen the entire series, so...
Yeah.
See what we think of it.
I don't know if I'd actually seen this episode before, but I think I remember, which goes into my silly, just the design of the aliens that Q spawns are very, very random. I guess it's Q just being silly. Yeah,
I think it is pretty much Q just being silly, because, Riker describes him as imaginative early on in the episode. So, I guess it's just this thing. The thing I liked about them was, there's the scene where later on they all get teleported back, and Geordi mentions that, we were in this thing and there were these animal things, and Picard's like, animal things? And Geordi's like, yeah, well, Data can describe it better, and Data opens his mouth for a second and then goes, actually, sir, you wouldn't find it aesthetically pleasing. It's just I thought that was...
Data the comedian, as always. The other thing I have, it's a silly good. Wesley dies for 30 seconds in this episode, and it was awesome.
Put that down.
He gets stabbed with a bayonet, and I was cheering. Oh,
you would.
He died, and then of course he got revived. But the only other one is Worf is as stupid as ever. Still, he's a real serious idiot in the first season.
Oh yeah, because he's still very much I Klingon, I fight.
They established in the first episode that Q is a superpowered god being, and Worf still wants to go and punch him in the face and stuff, as if that's actually going to affect the outcome of anything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he when Q first shows up, he hops over the the thing or whatever and draws his phaser immediately, and it's just
he goes over the railing.
What are you doing, bro? What do you do?
Yeah, he jumps over the tactical station.
Yep. I will say one thing I did. One silly I did have pertaining to Worf was near the very end of the episode when Q shows up again and before Riker bestows his gifts upon the bridge crew, Picard has this whole rant about calling Q a flim-flam man, and it cuts to Worf standing there for a few seconds and he just goes, flim-flam? It's just oh my god.
Yeah. I'm glad he's a minor character right now because of the way they write him.
He is.
Because he's a really great character later on, and especially in DS9, but they just made him like a Neanderthal in this.
They really did.
So, I don't have any real other observations. It's a pretty decently paced episode. I mean, it still looks and feels like the other first season episodes, but it has a real pace to it. Stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's interesting
I
to
only
watch.
had one bad, jumping back to that. But the only bad I had was I thought Riker's personality shift near the end of the episode was a little bit sudden.
It was very sudden, yeah.
He goes from being like, oh, yes, I can refuse this power, to like suddenly, basically walking out in the middle of Picard's sentence and referring to him as Jean-Luc on a first-name basis. It's a little sudden, but I think that's mostly just a product of the fact that the episode's already so jam-packed with goings on that they kind of had to. It was kind of a necessary evil, so to speak. Like, they kind of just had to fast-track that to get to the point they were trying to make.
Okay.
So it wasn't really much of a bad. I just thought it was just kind of like, suddenly Riker's, full of himself.
I think it's another thing that's just kind of a product of the era. Like, this season, even the good episodes feel very different, and the writing is all over the place still, even when it's good.
Yeah, it is just sort of...
it was 1987, so...
Yeah, it is still... I have to keep reminding myself of that it's actually 1987, because sometimes it feels like it could be, like, a decent episode in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's just how, like, roller coaster...
It does. And all the improvements that this show makes improve TV as a whole, so, whatever. Just gotta take it for what it is.
You really do.
But
that's why, like, even though I put it down as a bad, I recognize that part of it is just, product of its time and just how, tightly paced the episode is. It just kind of has to get to that point.
I would say my summary of this would just be, because of a lot of the philosophical dialogue that's exchanged between the characters, and a lot of the reflecting on humanity and all of that, I think this is my favorite episode so far.
Yeah. I would say, like, I did like this episode a lot. Like we've said, any episode with Q is interesting because, it's parts amusing and parts, like, deep philosophical stuff going on.
So is there anything else you have written down, or should we say our farewells?
That's pretty much it. Like, that's all I really had. That was my only bad, and that was kind of like a iffy one for me. I was sort of like... Yeah, I guess I'll put it down just so I have something to say, just to show that, we're actually looking at it closely instead of just being like, this episode's good.
What's the next episode? I think it's Haven?
Haven, yeah. Something with Counselor Troy, that's all I really remember.
So anyone who wants to follow along, that'll be the next one, episode 11. I think it's 10 on Netflix. Haven.
But as we said a few episodes back, Netflix combines the 2-part pilot into one, like, huge chunk on Netflix, so the numbering is off because of that.
So next episode is Haven. We'll probably do it Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah. I'd give this episode a B. Let's start grading them.
Yeah, I would say that would be a fairly accurate grade.
Okay, farewell, good listeners.
Bye-bye.